seasons. I'm sure you're up on like the big news in the NFL, the free agent moves, some of which are pretty significant. And as far as the Bills go, they've got James Cook to figure out. That's not a free agent move, but bringing in Joshua Palmer at wide receiver. Do you expect Palmer? Have you liked him as a player? I don't think you and I have hardly ever talked about him on the deep end or anything. But what kind of what kind of production do you expect there? And then we can figure out if that's playable in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I expect him to be their man beater, right? Like all this, the stuff's come out recently about how good he was against man defense last year, which is great. I think that's the role they kind of brought in Cooper to fill last year. They've got, their offense, as you guys know, they just kind of deploy their offense accordingly to like whatever defense that they're playing, and they target the players against those specific defenses. So, there'll be games like Cooper had last year where he was heavily involved, and then there will be games where he wasn't involved at all against certain zone defenses. So that's where I see Palmer. That's where I see kind of the Bills' receiving core again this season is just a bunch of like, is it your game? Is it time for you to perform? And I think, again, a lot of these guys will just be more best ball targets rather than guys that you really want to start. But, Palmer's still young enough where maybe he's got something. The thing that makes me nervous about him is, like, he already played with a pretty good quarterback in Justin Herbert and didn't really have, like, a ceiling outcome. So I don't really know how much more. I think he'll be a better football player than he will be a fantasy player. You'll have Shakir and, obviously all the other weapons there. And who knows if they're done at receiver. I think they probably are significantly as far as, like, adding another significant receiver. But Palmer could see himself on the field. Maybe, I don't know, can he run block? Is he Mac Hollins, next year where he plays 70% of the snaps? Who knows?
Well, that's interesting, Adam, because I with Hollins leaving, like, that happened after Palmer signed, right? That was the same evening, I think. And so we spent a day with the idea of them both being here, and it felt like, okay, Palmer, there's my Cooper replacement. I thought they needed a Cooper replacement in this receiving core, and counting on Coleman to just, ascend right away here in year two would have been a bet I wouldn't be willing to make with a team that's a Super Bowl contender. But now Hollins is out the door, and I sort of feel like, unless you're counting on Coleman to take a step, and maybe they are, but that, again, to me, feels like a bit of a risk, even though he's a relatively high pick. Like, I wonder if they are all done. And I know they signed Chenault last night, and so that's another body. But as far as someone who you can look at the team today and go, all right, I'm all set, I'm not sure if I'm all set.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think they've gotten away from. I don't think the Bills or Josh want that alpha number one. I think they did it with Diggs, and it worked. I think everything works for them. Last year they were top three again in scoring, and they had no one that you really loved in that receiving core as far as stats were concerned. Like, we all wanted it. We're like, oh great, they signed Cooper, and then Cooper almost had more catches in one game with the Browns the year before than he had 6 games or whatever it was with the Bills last year. I don't think they want that. I think they want to keep defenses guessing, which we hate for stats, we hate for fantasy, but it feels like everything works for them, and so I think they're going to continue to do it. I mean, again, I wouldn't hate them adding a big-time weapon, but I don't think they want to spend the money on it. I think, they haven't really been in on – I mean, thank God they didn't go get DK Metcalf for $30 million a year, and maybe Cooper is an option. Maybe he's going to test free agency. He's not going to get what he wants. He seemed to really like it in Buffalo, so maybe he will come back, but he barely played last year. I don't know if he's a bad run blocker, but from a Bills fan, I kind of like this idea of kind of like just kind of putting the different pieces out there. I mean, I hate the idea of not having James Cook on the field for the last possession of the season, but that's just kind of been their style. And for fantasy, it sucks. The only guy I really like is Khalil Shakir, I think, this year so far.
We've gone a long way here, and this is happening a lot. Well, I mean, also because of like what's topical, but analyzing the Bills' passing offense without mentioning Kincaid Coleman or Dalton Kincaid. Last year at this time, we were asking these same questions. Coleman eventually. I mean, the draft hadn't happened yet, but who will be the man in the offense? And really, it wasn't anybody, no more so than Shakir, who led them in stats. What are your feelings about Kincaid and then Coleman versus a year ago? It's 2 years now for Kincaid. There haven't been touchdowns. There haven't been, big games. Do you sort of buy the idea that injuries were a problem for him and that it'll get there, or maybe are you worried about that at this point?
Yeah, Kincaid's different. We used to wait 3-4 years for tight ends to break out. We used to wait 3 years for receivers to break out. So sometimes you kind of got to remember, these breakouts don't always come in their rookie year, even when you're playing with the MVP. Coleman's interesting. A lot of times in fantasy circles, we talk about the second-year breakout now and just kind of blindly taking these second-year receivers. You think of guys like JSN last year heading into a second year. Hey, just blindly take him because he's a talented player, and then he has an insane year. I don't expect that out of Coleman, but there is something to be said. Injuries, rookie, maybe he takes that second-year step. I mean, I think he should be at least as good as Gabe Davis was, kind of the same type of player. I think he's probably better. And then the tight end situation. And I do like the fact that the coaching staff and the GM kind of called them both out. Hey, they got to get stronger. They got to get better. We need them to type of thing. And maybe that lights a fire for them. And if they don't make any other significant additions to this offense, I could see them having years where they step up and kind of perform. I think, too, kind of back to the James Cook point, is he scored a lot of touchdowns for a guy that didn't get a lot of goal line carries and didn't get catches. Maybe some of those long touchdowns turn into long touchdowns for Kincaid and Coleman or Dalton Kincaid, and then kind of you see the flip script there.
The way that you just referenced the way that both Bean and McDermott talked about both guys, but especially Coleman, that's part of the reason I already mentioned that I'm reluctant to just buy into him ascending immediately, because I don't know. I mean, for them to be as direct and pointed as they were in those criticisms of him could be, okay, I don't know, but could be a sign of a deeper problem. To me, it's always just everyone's holding hands and singing songs normally once we get to the off season. He worked hard, he's developing, we believe in him, and instead it was we need more, basically. And that makes me wonder just how dug in he was coming back from that injury, and I don't know, maybe maturity even is a question. So that is a bit of a red flag for me. I'm not entirely down on him as a prospect, but I'm worried that the Bills are down on him, and that really doesn't add up to them betting on him, to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's all it's all fun and games when he's joking about chocolate chip cookies during a press conference, but then you're like, wait a minute, how serious is he? Mature? How serious is he taking this? I think those are all good points, that we won't really know. And again, is there a disconnect between Bean and McDermott on what type of players he wants? He talked to, he mentioned a couple weeks ago, he always wants receivers with speed, and maybe they're drafting guys that don't really fit the offensive scheme. So I don't know, but I hope for their sake and for fantasy-wise, that if they do want certain types of players, that they just go out and get them, whether it's via trade or via, in the draft trading for speedier receivers, or drafting them, or at least not letting, Kansas City jump ahead of them and take them.
Right. How do you feel about Cook moving forward here? I know it's not exactly a fantasy question, but the contract thing, how he's handling social media, it could be a thing that kind of percolates through the spring and who knows, maybe even into the summer. Of course, they could sign him to a contract extension tomorrow and it's all over. But I don't know, man. He played not even 50% of the snaps, and being asked to be paid or wanting to be paid at the top of the market, I'm reluctant there. I mean, there's the whole running back thing, period, but then just a guy that's on the field half the time commanding a top-of-market salary, I'm having trouble with.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way they're going to pay it. They did. I mean, it's beautiful I love James Cook as a player for the Bills. It's beautiful for them, too. They take him in the third round, and he's awesome, and you get him cheap. That's what you do. One contract, and then you kind of move on from him. I don't think Cook's jockeying. He had a great season, so he's trying to get paid from it, but he's not going to this year with the Bills, I don't think. And so it's just, I think, jockeying back and forth. I think it'll be fine. I think he'll play well again for the Bills next year. I mean, and so, but fantasy-wise, I'm still kind of where I was last year. He doesn't get those high-value targets, whether it's the catches or the goal line stuff. He just kind of had a really efficient season where he was scoring from longer distances, and he can't really. I could see his running back. I could see his touchdowns being cut 2/3 next year. Just, he doesn't get as lucky on kind of those long runs. Maybe, they miss again, little stuff like Matt Collins stuffing guys in lockers 20 yards down the field. If they don't have that,
right.
Does he score those 30-yard touchdown runs? So, but I like him for the Bills, obviously, and I think it'll be fine. You guys kind of have a better pulse on the locker room than I do, but I think he'll be there to play, and then he'll probably move on after his contract.
In fantasy, he's running back 14, which is kind of insane if you just look at sort of the back of the football card stats, right? 18 combined touchdowns, plus he had 2 against Kansas City in the playoffs. Monster year, but Bulldog referenced the snap share, 44% last year, 29th among running backs. And sharp, if you're playing fantasy football in February and March, you're probably kind of really into it. And doesn't mean you're going to be right, but running back 14 behind Chase Brown, who was good for Cincinnati, but maybe they draft somebody, I don't know. Some of the guys ahead of him, it's a little bit curious that I don't think it's wrong. Adam, but he's going early 4th round, and that might surprise people.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's just people have gotten so much sharper these days with all the information.
Podcasts.
Yeah, exactly.
All the good podcasts.
Deep end podcasts, exactly. But I think what you're going to have, too, is you'll probably start seeing analysts talk about, he only played, like Bulldog said, he only played 44% or whatever the snaps. If that upticks to 60, oh, my gosh, what could that mean? They're bringing all the running backs back. It's the same backfield. I don't see it changing. He did miss 1 game last year, so I think they like keeping him fresh, especially for the playoffs. So I don't see much changing except for maybe some less luck on those long touchdowns.
So there have been some big moves in the league, of course. You mentioned Metcalf before. I think you said you wouldn't have liked that for the Bills. I kind of did like it. I don't like him with Pittsburgh. That is not great. If any receiver is going to go there, we'll see what Pittsburgh does at quarterback, but no answer there yet. It's Metcalf and George Pickens for now on that, in that passing attack. Can that work for both guys?
No, I don't think it can. What's their best available option right now at quarterback? Is it Rodgers? Is it Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson might be actually better for them. Those are downfield kind of winners there.
Yeah.
Rodgers, I would lean towards Rodgers being the betting favorite to get the job there. Rodgers is a guy that needs his guys in those specific spots where he wants them, when he wants them there. That's not Metcalf. That's not Pickens. And so they don't pass enough. Arthur Smith is, I don't trust Arthur Smith. So I think Metcalf is kind of in trouble there, and Pickens, as far as fantasy is concerned, they're still going to run the bubble. I'm kind of more interested in their backfield. Najee's gone now with the Chargers. What I kind of be interested to see with their running game is concerned. I like them as an offensive unit. I think they have a ton of talent, but it's just I don't think it's going to happen for Metcalf and Pickens. I could see them both blowing up on the sidelines one game and it being a huge issue. But fantasy, I definitely don't like it at all.
Is there a place that Rodgers goes where it moves the meter for you at all at this point?
I don't think he goes anywhere that moves the meter positively for me.
Right.
I trust. I thought he had a good shot last year. He had the talent around him, and it just never worked out. And I think he's kind of he was having issues. Does he even want to play anymore? That type of thing. So I don't think there's anywhere he would go where I would really be like, oh, that's exciting, because Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson did not have great years with him last season. So and the Jets had a great skill position group around him. Breece Hall, everybody there. So right. I'm not excited for wherever he goes.
What do you think of Devontae Adams on the Rams? I love it.
I love it. You just have to. He's a better right now. He's a better Cooper. Stafford's a kingmaker at receiver. So I absolutely love it.
Any thoughts on the Bengals situation? There's a report today that from Schefter that they're getting close on Chase and Higgins, if you can believe that. Higgins was somebody that we kind of all figured would be gone all last year, but maybe not. And if they are able to keep them both, then I think they go back to being not only sort of dangerous in real life, but very valuable in fantasy. Chase just led the league in everything.
Yeah, I love that. Again, too, it's one of those where you just when Higgins is healthy, I mean, I'm always overweight on Higgins every year in drafting, and last year he was going like super late, and he was, insane when he played. He's always banged up, but it's one of those things where, if they're on the board at ADP, you want to draft him because it just you don't want to overthink it. Chase is going in number one, top three, that type of thing. So I think you kind of lock those guys in, and then from a NFL perspective, I mean, they make them super dangerous. Now their defense is terrible, which is, hey, go get Trey Hendrickson, make their defense even worse. That's a little addition by subtraction there for that, but keep them out of the playoffs. But I like that they're going to push the Ravens to have to score, push the Steelers to have to score. So I love Higgins, I love Chase. Kind of can't miss guys other than the injuries.
Adam, you told me. Yes, in confidence, but I'm about to say it. You're really not ready to talk about rookies yet. You've got your family, your job, the baseball thing. Anything you'd like to know? You have one question for us about rookies.
Oh, wow. Well, I was going to say, at least we don't have to talk about this year, but Ashton Janty to the Bills? Is that what I'm hearing?
Is that what you're hearing? We got to figure that. We got to talk about that if that's what you're hearing. Chicago it's going to be top 12, I think, for Genty. That's my guess. So you have the Bears, Dallas is in there. Dallas is at 12. And even Vegas, possibly, which I think any of those is great.
Yes.
Is great for Genty. Awesome. And also Denver, who picks later. I think Denver would be great. And really, then it's a matter of, is the coach of that team going to want to use him a lot? And that doesn't always happen. Even Bijan Robinson did not get tons of work as a rookie. So that's what we're rooting for there. It'd be nice to have a normal, great running back prospect get drafted in the first round and actually play and do well. Barkley's the last one.
Yeah, and not get hurt. I mean, Breece Hall, I think, had a really good rookie year, but he got hurt. Yeah, you said there was an ML. Just keep him away from Arthur Smith. Keep him away from Pittsburgh because Bijan Robinson, that was a disaster. But yeah, anywhere where these guys can get, and because that's key, right? Touches in fantasy. I mean, look at the Chargers now, right? They got running backs there now. They got Najee. It's like, man, if he's going to get 300 touches, he's not very good, but. It's all about opportunity in fantasy, and you get a guy like Janty with all the opportunity.